You're listening to the Sisters-in-Laws podcast, a faith-based podcast that spotlights Black women who replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Black women experience miscarriage and stillbirth 4 to 5 times more likely than white women, according to the NIH and CDC. Whether you've experienced a miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, are trying to conceive, or have an infertility diagnosis, you will learn about resources and strategies to heal, gain clarity, peace, hope, and find an empowering path forward after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee, and you will hear me interview sisters-in-laws who have healed from such a painful and traumatic experience by sharing their testimonies and stories to inspire and help others turn their pain into their purpose. Now let's get started. Welcome to episode 213 of the Sisters-in-Laws podcast. Have you been told you need to experience at least 2 or more miscarriages before seeing a fertility specialist? Today's guest experienced that after going through a miscarriage, a chemical pregnancy loss, and another miscarriage. The fertility clinic would determine there were no genetic abnormalities and nothing wrong with her remains. They suggested she lose weight and would run more tests after she lost half of the weight. Andrea Clark Horton didn't make it back to the fertility clinic because she found out she was pregnant. After losing 30 pounds, she became pregnant and she left her role as a labor attorney and went back to school to obtain a master's in divinity. Andrea birthed her rainbow baby boy and changed careers to become a pastoral care counselor and chaplain responsible for supporting women and families experiencing pregnancy and infant loss or illness and other chronic or terminal illness. In today's episode, Andrea takes us on her journey of miscarriages, D&Cs, getting the call from God to ministry and switching careers, going through divorce, and finding hope in helping others with her ministry, all the beautiful pieces. This episode is for you to listen to if you've been called to a higher purpose and have yet to surrender to this call. This episode is for you to listen to if you have experienced a miscarriage or chemical pregnancy loss. Here is Andrea Clark Horton. Well, welcome, Andrea, to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so glad you have this platform and that you're talking about this, Erica.
Yes. Thank you so much. So I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I am a full-time hospital chaplain. I concentrate my care for patients who have been diagnosed with terminal cancer, but also I am the primary chaplain at my hospital. I work at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago. I'm the primary chaplain for our patients experiencing perinatal and infant loss, or for our parents of patients, our babies in the neonatal intensive care unit. So I come to that work after having received a call to ministry about 9 years ago now, while I was practicing law. So I'm a licensed attorney. I left the full-time practice of law to go to seminary. And then this is where God directed me to this ministry that I now call work.
Yes. Oh man, I would love to hear this journey. I'm sure it coincides with your journey with loss. So take us back on your journey to motherhood and share with us your loss story.
Sure. So I I divorced last year, but we were married for 16 years. And in 2008, we had been married for 5 years at that time and decided that we wanted to start a family. I had been on birth control for almost 10 years before that while we were dating. And so I stopped birth control and, we had been praying about the timing and praying about, really wanting to start our family. And our plan was to have 2 children within 2 years. So 2008, in the summer, I find out that right after I stopped taking birth control, the next cycle, we got pregnant right away. And so we really thought of that as, God listening to and answering our prayer. We didn't expect for it to happen so quickly, but we thought surely this is what, God has answered our prayer. So about week 6 into the pregnancy, I started spotting. And I went to the emergency room and they did an ultrasound and they said, oh no, everything is fine. The blood looks like it's old blood. Sometimes as the baby is growing, it pushes off this excess blood from on top of your cervix. And so that's what it looks like is happening. Everything is fine. And then the bleeding got heavier. So I went to my OBGYN and she sent me for a more in-depth ultrasound at the specialty clinic at the hospital where I was receiving care. And the doctor came out and I could tell when he walked out after having looked at the ultrasound, he said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but, you should be at that point, I should have been about 10 weeks. And he said their fetus is only measuring at 5.5, 6 weeks. And so it's inevitable. Like we call this a missed abortion. There's no heart tones, which we should see by now. And for as far along as you should be, the baby should be bigger. So I'm so sorry to say the baby stopped growing and probably passed away at about a couple weeks ago. So that was devastating because as you plan and you feel like God has answered this prayer, that lines up with this plan that you have for starting your family. And as you see people around you starting families and don't hear any tales of those kind of struggles, it was heartbreaking. I think I was also practicing law full time at the time. And I think one of the other things that I felt immediately after that loss was this sense of failure. And so I think for me, as a woman who was used to setting her mind to a goal and achieving and doing well at whatever I set my mind to, it was like I couldn't get over the fact that this is something that I failed at, that I could not do, that teenage girls without any, desire to be mothers or women addicted to drugs could do this and I couldn't. So I think it prompted in me this desire to start again right away as soon as we could. We did as soon as the doctor gave us the okay, and I got pregnant again just a couple months after the first miscarriage. And so it was February of 2009, I found out that I was pregnant again and excited about that. And then, as soon as I found out, I told my OB and she wanted me to come in, much sooner. I think sometimes they'll have you wait until you're about 6-8 weeks along. She wanted me to come in right away. And so my blood levels and the hormones showed that I was pregnant, but she said there's something off because your hormone levels are a little bit low, so I'm concerned. And so she did an ultrasound, and what she found was that there was a sac there, but it was empty. And she explained to me that they call that a chemical pregnancy or a blighted ovum, where the egg, your body thinks that this egg has been fertilized, but there's no embryo in the sac. And so I really couldn't understand. I didn't understand that. And I think that, not that I didn't understand it medically, like I understood I trusted what she was saying. But then after the first loss, she told me that it's only something like 4 or 5% of people who experience back-to-back losses like that. And so probably the next time we got pregnant, it would be fine. And here I was again, and it wasn't fine. And I think that I really felt, instead of the feelings of failure this time were definitely there, but there was more of an anger there. And it was really an anger toward God. I was really mad. I was really mad with God. And especially as there were people around me who were getting pregnant and who didn't want any more kids. They didn't want kids, or people who I had prayed with and prayed for their families starting, and it was happening for them. And here I was again with this story of not being able to carry a child. And so I was angry. I was mad. I mean, I really was. I remember having a conversation with God where I actually told God, like, God, I quit you. Like, I'm done with you, because it seems as though you have no regard for what it is that I want. And I have these really great intentions. I will be a great parent. And you keep answering my prayer by having people around me get the very thing that I've been praying to you for myself. And it felt cruel. And I felt like God was making fun of me and was showing me just how inadequate I was. And so I decided that I was going to walk away. Like I stopped going to church for several nights of the week. I would start hanging out with my single friends. I was drinking a whole lot, like a whole lot, to the point of almost blacking out a couple times a week. Driving myself home is nothing but the grace of God, really, that I'm alive, because there were nights when I was so drunk, I would drive myself home from the bar and be swerving lanes coming home down the street or the highway, and made it home just in time. You know, it put a lot of stress on my marriage at the time. But I don't even think that I realized that there was this grief, right, that I was unable to really effectively deal with. And part of that, I think, if you've been through an early pregnancy loss, is there's shame around it, so people don't talk about it. It's not something that people will let you know. And then people have a tendency to think that because this was an early pregnancy loss, that you never held the baby, that you didn't really start to see your belly grow, that you really didn't get to know the baby, that there should be no attachment to it. And so it's the same thing as if you had a cold or the flu and now you're better, so get over it. And people never said anything like that to me as bluntly, but the messages from people were the same. Like, there's no need for you to cry over this baby that you really didn't know. And so I felt like I had no right to grieve those losses, but I think that my mind started to look for other ways for me to cope with it. And that became me. I feel like I was acting out like a rebellious teenager, and I was probably 34, 33 at the time, 32, 33 at the time. So at a couple months, about a year after that loss, I had an encounter with a woman who I was friendly with, but we weren't good friends. We were just kind of acquaintances. We were friendly, who reached out to me via text early 2010, just to see how I was doing. And I told her, I'm fine. And she said, "Oh, but how are you really doing?" And I said, "No, I'm okay. I'm doing all right." She said, "God says none of this was meant to hurt you." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "All the things that have happened in the last year, God says none of it was meant to hurt you." And she said to me, "Did you lose a baby?" I hadn't told her or anybody that we knew in common about that. And so I said, "How did you know that?" And she said, "God is showing me. There are two babies." And I said, "Yes." And she said that he knows that's part of why you're hurting, but that nothing you've been through will be wasted, that you will minister to people. But right now, he's ready for you to come back to him. He wants you to know he's sorry you're hurting. She says, "I can see him standing there with his arms open, almost like he's waiting to hug you. And he knows your heart is broken, but he wants you to come home." And so it was at that time when I um, she kept saying something to me about you're gonna minister. He's calling you to minister for him, and I didn't really understand what that meant. But I remember going into the bathroom of my apartment and dropping to my knees and saying to him, God, I don't know what it is you want from me, but I surrender to you for real this time. Anything that you want, like I want to do it your way. And so my ex-husband and I then went about finding a new church. We found a new church. We got involved in church, very welcoming. I'm still at the same church, New Faith Baptist Church in Matson, Illinois, and got really involved in ministry on fire for God again. And then kind of out of the blue, in July of 2010, when we had decided to stop talking about and trying for a baby, we were just gonna relax and get some us time and repair what had been broken by my behavior, by the grief that we hadn't dealt with. And in July 2010, found out I was pregnant for the third time. And so really thought that this time God was like, this is him saying, you've been through all of this stuff and now you come back to me and, here is this child for whom you have prayed. And the pregnancy went along really smoothly. I mean, we got to about week 8 and this is the first time I ever saw a heart tones of a child that I was carrying. And so my wonderful OB-GYN, Monica Moore, had been through all of those previous losses with us. And she said, I'm pulling for this Horton baby. I'm ready for you all to be parents. Oh, look, you can see the heartbeat. And so we were so excited, like, finally God, praise your name. We thank you. And we're so sorry that it took for us so long to yield to you and all these things, and we were excited. But because of my history, she had me coming back every 2 weeks to get ultrasounds. And so when I went in for the 10-week ultrasound, I remember sitting in that waiting room and just feeling like something is not right. And at 8 weeks, 10 weeks, you're not going to feel a baby kicking or anything like that. But I just felt like something wasn't right. And so I went in for her to do the ultrasound, and bless her heart, she was trying every angle she could. She was, adjusting her screen. She was adjusting me to make sure. She was shaking my stomach to, make the baby turn over. And she said, we saw heart tones last time. No, we saw heart tones. And I said, yeah, we did. And so she kept looking, and I finally said, Dr. Moore, it's okay. She said, no. This baby had heart tones. I said, Dr. Moore, it's okay. It is okay. It's not okay, but it's okay. Like, I know this little one is going to be with God. It's okay. And so she said, well, I'm going to run your blood just in case. And so she did all that, and my hormone levels had dropped. And so I knew that I, had miscarried again. And none of these 3 pregnancies, they were all missed abortions because the contents never came out. The baby never came out by itself. I either had to have a D&E surgery, which I did for the first 2 to have the contents evacuated. But the third one, she was saying, I believe you're going to be a mom. I don't want to do another surgery for you because every time we do that, that compromises your ability to carry. And so she said, so this time we can either wait it out or I can give you some medicine, which will force you to go into contractions and the baby, and the contents will just come out. And so I opted to do that. The first time I tried that, it didn't work. And so I had to go back and get more. The second time, it worked. And I remember she gave me a pain medication. So as I was having contractions, like I was having labor contractions, and I was dozing off and kind of waking up every time I was contracting. And so I woke up about 4 a.m. and a pool of blood in the bed with my ex-husband. And so I'll go to the bathroom, and the little baby, which I could see looked like a tiny little, looked like a little blob, but I could tell it was my baby. It was balled up in the fetal position. just plopped into the toilet. And so then I had to get the contents out of the toilet and put them in a little cup, take them to my OB because she wanted to test the tissue to see what was going on. And so I remember that my ex-husband going to get a mixing spoon from the kitchen so we could get the contents out of the toilet, and he was going to go get, because I was so upset. I was crying and I just kept saying to him, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And he said, stop apologizing. It's okay, honey. I'll take care of you. I'll get this. You get yourself washed up. And I said, I'm like, no, I'm the mommy. I want to hold the baby first. And so I took the spoon from him and scooped the baby out of the toilet and put it into the little cups that the doctor given us. Took it for testing. And then I went to a recurrent pregnancy loss specialist. That's all she does is see women who had 3 or more pregnancy losses. And she got the results and she said there was nothing chromosomally wrong with the baby. So she tested that one and the other 2, the tissue from the other 2. There was nothing wrong with the babies. She tested myself and my husband. There were no genetic abnormalities that she could find. So she said, I just work on losing a little bit of weight and, we'll run some other testing, but you all can try again. So we did that, and then we stopped trying. We went through the whole process. I was losing weight, did what she told me to do, and without thinking about it, in the midst of this, I had accepted my call to ministry, 2012. So I started seminary in 2012, and that's when God called me away from the full-time practice of law at the end of 2012. And then January 2013, I found out that I was pregnant again. At the month after, it was almost literally a month after I left my job practicing law to go back to seminary full-time, I found out that I was pregnant again. And that pregnancy was the pregnancy that was successful. And I have now an almost 8-year-old little boy named Grant, who is with his daddy this weekend, but he is a joy, and he's probably got the spirit and personality enough for 3 children. But he is my one, and he is my only. He'll probably be my only biological child. But really is a blessing and a gift from God.
Yes. Thank you for taking us on that journey. So how is your journey through your pregnancy after loss? Did you experience any anxiety and fear? And as you were navigating seminary, oh my goodness, this is all happening at the same time. So share with us about that journey.
Yeah, no, I was scared. I was in my second semester of seminary when I found out that I was pregnant. I was working part-time at a nonprofit organization, and we decided that we were not going to tell anybody until we made it to maybe the 16-week mark. But it was all of that. Like, one of the things that we say to our patients, I say to my patients who've experienced loss, and then they have he's my rainbow baby, right? That's what they call the baby that comes after the loss. And then they're pregnant and have children after that loss, is that the naivete is gone, right? So this blind excitement that you might have the first time when you are expecting a baby and it's something that you desired, that you wanted, that excitement about being a parent. And if you've experienced loss, and which I had 3 times at this point, it's kind of replaced by this reluctance to be joyful about it. You're nervous. You're scared. Like, at this point that things can, go wrong. And so you're not even just reluctant to share with people, you're reluctant to even be hopeful and joyful. I remember after the first time I was pregnant, like looking at, you start looking at baby things. You're looking at, I wonder what color we're gonna decorate the room, and like, are we gonna find out if it's a boy or a girl, and thinking about names right away, and looking at baby cribs and all of that. I started to do that as soon as I found out I was pregnant the first time. By the time I was pregnant with my son, with Grant, like, I was just reluctant to do any of that. And the thing that I did do that I think that helped me to manage that was I stayed off of the internet, like the chat, the forums about, being pregnant after the chat forums, because everybody's experience is different, right? And so I just couldn't take seeing somebody say, well, I had these losses, and then I was hopeful for this next baby, and this is going to be my rainbow baby, and we lost him, we lost her. I just couldn't take that. So to manage my own kind of mental health, I refused to do that, and we didn't tell anybody. We got the genetic testing when I was about 12 weeks, so we knew that he was a boy, that there were no genetic anomalies that came up, but we didn't tell anybody until I was about 20 weeks. And it probably wasn't until the middle of my second trimester when I actually began to allow myself to feel the hopefulness and the joy of becoming a mom.
Yes. So you had to get through certain milestones before you were like, okay, this baby is here. This baby is coming. God is going to bless me with this miracle. So I love that. I'm happy that you shared all of that. So how has your journey now been? You have transitioned from, being a lawyer now to being, going to seminary, graduating. Now you're a chaplain. How has that helped you, or not, as you navigated your own personal grief journey to be able to support and be there for people as they navigate their own, especially since it's so fresh? Chaplains are normally right there when something happens. So how has that journey been for you?
I think, like I remember the words of that woman that I was friendly with at the time. Between my second and third pregnancy, I think she's instrumental in helping me realize my call to ministry. And what she said to me was, God says none of this is going to be wasted. You're going to minister to people. And at the time, when you're in the throes of pain, that's not always a comforting thought, right? Like, I don't really want to minister to people. I don't care about that. I want to have my babies. That's what I wanted, but I think that in as time has passed, grief is not a thing that I don't think you get over. Losing a child, no matter what stage of your pregnancy, or what age or what stage of their lives they were in, is something you move through. And I think that as I've moved through it, and as I'm able to accompany these parents at the beginning of this loss journey, this grief, is I recall what it was like for me to feel this deep pain, that I had never felt before, that was inexplicable. Like, there are no words that can adequately describe the depth of the pain of, like, literally losing hope, because children represent this hope, this excitement about the future. So there is literally there are no words that can describe pain of having hope snatched from you in the form of losing a baby. And so I've been able to use my own experiences to empathize, not sympathize, to empathize. I can understand what it means, or relate to what it means to be in that position. And then I also remember the stupid things that people said to me at the time, or close to the time. And so I know what not to say. And then to share with the families who I support that this is an inexplicable pain that most people are not going to be able to relate to. And to take as much time and be as kind to yourselves and as gentle with yourselves as you can right now. And you don't owe anybody else any explanations for how you deal with this grief. You don't owe anybody anything. And I also think that one of the things that I learned through my journey in ministry and through my journey with my own losses is that people really are, when they say these things about, at least you didn't know the baby, or, at least, God needed another flower in the garden, or, God needed another angel in heaven, which are really trite statements, right? But I think that people make those statements really out of an effort to comfort you. They just don't understand how to do that. And so I think about all the things that I wish people would have said to me. I wish that I remember what it would mean for somebody to just be present, for me to feel like God is still with me, or for me to be able to say that I'm angry with God to somebody who can tell me that every feeling that I have about this is okay, and that God is big enough to absorb every emotion that you have, every thought that you have. It's okay. God is not, it's not going to pull away from you. In our most difficult moments is when God pushes in closer. And so I just recall I'm able to use what I've been through to minister to families effectively in that moment, because I remember what it was like to be there. And there are things that I wish people had said to me, or allowed me to say, or just allowed for their presence to be enough. And it gets difficult sometimes, because I will often do that and pray with the families at the bedside, or bless or dedicate or baptize, their little ones, or the remains of their little ones, as they ask me to do. And I will, leave and go into the hallway, and me and God will have a discussion about, now, God, why did you do this? This is not fair. This is not fair to these people. This is not fair. Like, why would you let them hope and then take, and then God lets me vent, and letting it out and encouraging my patients and the families to let it out as well. And that they're not offending God. They're not going to break God's heart by expressing what is on theirs, because they still belong to him too. It's something that I wish somebody would have offered me at the time.
Yes, and God can handle the hard questions.
Exactly.
Well, he may not give us an answer, but he sure can handle all the range of emotions that we feel, because he gave them to us. So that always frees people when you're able to empathize and share that with folks. That frees everybody to say, hey, what I'm feeling is valid, even if it's anger, even if it's not exhortation like we normally do. That I can be mad right now, and I can stay mad for a little while. It's
exactly. Okay. And then sometimes you go from being mad to laughing and joking, thinking about, the things that you had planned for him, and joking like, I hope the husband, I hope he doesn't have your big ears. Well, I hope that he doesn't have, you know what I mean? Like joking about that, and being okay with being joyful about that. And then the next day you might feel sad, and it might come back and that you're angry again. And the next day you might be okay, because grief is a dynamic process. It's a wave, and that it's okay. And nobody can put a timeline on what that looks like for you. But also, if you find yourself in a place where you are so sad that you're unable to function, that it's also okay for you to reach out to somebody for help.
Absolutely. So did you use any tools or resources? Did you go to therapy or counseling? How did you help? What are some things that you use to help you navigate your journey?
So I will say that at first, I did not. It wasn't until after it was after the second loss, when my ex-husband and I joined our church, I realized that I needed help. And so I reached out to my new church leadership for pastoral counseling. And one of the reasons why I really love my church is that I went for the pastoral counseling with one of the staff pastors. And we talked about, my emotions and my feelings toward God and, my self-blame and all of that. And he said to me, I'm more than happy to continue to meet with you to talk through the spiritual aspects of this, but I really want you to go and get help from a professional mental health counselor. And, you can find people who, if it will make you more comfortable, who are avowed, Christians, who have that perspective in mind, and they can bring that to into the work that they do with you. But it's not an either or, it's a both and. Like you need to do both. And I can't remember the name of the book he recommended for us, my ex-husband and I, to read. I can't remember the name of it, but it was out of print when he recommended it. That was 11 years ago. So it was out of print, and but it was a book about specifically about the loss, the grief around pregnancy loss. So I did go and see a counselor for a few months. And then I found out I was pregnant again. So I thought that I was okay. And when I lost the third pregnancy, again, went for more spiritual counseling. And then I went to counseling with, she was a Black female licensed clinician, to talk about that. And it was also, by the time that I was ready to talk about the losses again, unfortunately, I lost my dad. So all this grief was being compounded, and it was overwhelming me. And so I went to talk with a counselor again. One of the things that I do at the hospital is there are two social workers that work with me who only see patients who have experienced a loss, a pregnancy or infant loss. And we actually share office. And so one of them facilitates during non-COVID time, she facilitated a support group for pregnancy, perinatal loss, miscarriage, infant loss. And she invited me a couple of years ago to begin co-facilitating that with her. So I do that. And I commend those parents, those moms. Even sometimes it's just the partner or the father that comes in to the support group, but to be around people who have experienced the same kind of devastating event, there's power in that. I wish that I would have taken advantage of something like that at the time when I was experiencing my losses, instead of believing the lie that because my losses were early, that they somehow I wasn't entitled to grieve them. Like I needed to move on because that's just simply not true. So there are resources out there that are still doing those support groups virtually. I didn't take advantage of that because I didn't believe that my grief was valid at the time. But I would encourage people to do that as well. There are a couple of books that, not at the time when I had my losses, but since the time that I've become minister and administer in this area, that sometimes are helpful. And I don't want to give the incorrect names and authors' names, but I can certainly, I think, send that to you if you like me to do those things. But those kind of resources. But I also think that being able to have access to mental health counselors and professional clergy who are able to walk with you through kind of what the stages of your grieving about this was helpful to me.
Yes, absolutely. You definitely can send those to me and I'll make sure I link them. As you know, I feel like 2020 and now into 2021, we are all still in this time of collective grief and trauma from this coronavirus. And it's, really changed us into this this new normal that we're in. And I feel like, obviously we don't know how COVID-19 and, us being locked down and shut down for nearly a year is going to impact us. But I always think about those who are in this community who had to grieve alone during this time, who may have had to put their IVF treatments on pause. They may have, are navigating this journey with a pregnancy after loss and having to do it alone, where their partner is on FaceTime with them because they can't go into the clinic or see the ultrasound or go into the hospital because of all the restrictions that were put in place and are still in place for this virus. So I feel like, I have a special heart even more so now for those who are grieving the expectations of the loss of expectations of things that they should have and could have been doing. And then just how they're just navigating this journey as a whole, because as it starts to warm up, people are going to go outside, and then, who knows what the numbers are going to look like. We hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel, especially with the new administration and making sure that we all get vaccinated. But I would love for you to just leave some encouraging words for the parents who are listening, because we are all navigating this journey together, and really speak to those who may be grieving and going through the loss of expectation during this moment.
Oh, that's an excellent point, right? Because I have definitely had to accompany some patients who experience loss, and especially if it's a surgical procedure rather than a delivery. A lot of hospitals will let a partner be there for delivery, but if it's a surgical procedure, they're not allowing the partner to be there for support before and after recovery. So it is difficult. What I would say is, if you are able to, ask your medical provider, hospital where you may be, if they have professional clergy or chaplains on site that might be able to come pray with you, sit with you before, during, or after. I have been in the delivery room as babies were being delivered. So if that's something that is available, avail yourself of that resource. But also knowing, like, what we have had, normal has been turned upside down. And so I know we're all Zoomed out and FaceTimed out, but if that is the source of support that is available to you, a source of the means of getting your support to you that's available to you, definitely avail yourself of that support, of that means of support. And I will say, the thing that I think that sometimes I forgot in the midst of my grief, even in the times when things weren't as difficult as they are in this moment in history for our world, I forgot that God was with me the first couple of times, that it felt like God was so far. And I just want to encourage you to know that the word says that He is close to the brokenhearted. And so it is at the times when we feel least loved, when we are in most pain, when it feels most difficult and it feels like the world is crashing in around us, that God, as close as He walks with us every day, He pulls in even closer. God is there. When you can't see Him, when you can't feel Him, know in your heart of hearts that His promise to never leave nor forsake you is never more pertinent than at the moment when you're hurting the most. And so even if you don't have the words to say to yourself, even if there's not a clergy or a chaplain or your praying auntie who can always get one through there, even if you can't find the words to say, all you can say is, God help. God, this hurts. God, I need you. That God hears you, that God receives that, and that God is going to be there. So my prayer for you is that in the ways that you need to know, because God makes each one of us, knows all of His children, and He knows what you need to know that He's with you when He feels the furthest away. I pray that God would show you that He's right there with you in a way that is unmistakably God answering that cry for your help. God is there. God is there. There's no visitor restriction, no coronavirus quarantine that can keep him from being close to his children when we need him the most.
Amen. Amen. That definitely speaks to me. I don't care what season you're in, that you just need that reminder and that encouragement that he's there. He's always been there. So I absolutely love it. So where can our listeners connect with you after this episode?
I'm on Facebook. I'm Andrea Clark Horton on Facebook. You can connect. I have a blog that I need to stop being disobedient and actually update. I have a few things that I need to include on there, especially for this time we're navigating. But my blog is called All the Beautiful Pieces, and you can find it at Andrea Horton ESQ.wix site, WIXSITE.com and /beautiful pieces.
Yes, and I'll make sure I link your blog in our show notes in our description box. Thank you so much, Andrea, for being on the podcast. This has been such a blessing. I know our listeners will gain so much from your story.
Erica, thank you so much for having me. And again, I really just applaud you for creating this platform and for giving us space as women and women of color to be able to share about, pregnancy and infant loss. It really is a necessary thing that you're doing. And so I thank God for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For show notes, go to sistersinloss.com. To stay connected with us and join the Sisters in Loss community and receive my weekly newsletter, please go to sistersinloss.com/newsletter. That is sistersinloss.com/newsletter. Please rate and review this episode, and I will talk to you next week.